Right, let me just introduce Mark Critchley then, who will be chairing the first of the keynote speeches today. So Mark Critchley is Director of the Centre for Foreign Language Study at Durham University and current Chair of the Association of University Language Communities in the UK and Ireland, AULC. Mark has been involved in the organising committee for the first two Arabic language learning and teaching conferences in Leeds and King's College, London. So now I'll hand over to you, Mark, so that you can introduce Victoria.
And welcome everybody, Sabah al Khair. It's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker today. And before I start with the introduction, could I invite Professor Aguilar to switch on your camera and microphone? Okay, so I'm going to be chairing the first session this morning. Our first keynote address will be from Professor Aguilar, as I mentioned. I will be monitoring the time of presentation, obviously, and also will be fielding the questions. So just a little bit before we start, this is obviously the first session, and having organised a conference last week online, the chat can become quite problematic. So what I was going to request is any questions for Professor Aguilar can be placed in the chat in writing during the talk. And maybe if you could refrain from other more routine comments during that, just so we can make sure we hit on the questions. And forgive me not being a native Arabic speaker or even any form of Arabic speaker, if you could ask your questions in English, then I'll be able to field them at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to formally welcome Professora Victoria Aguilar from the Universidad de Murcia in Spain. She's been working in Murcia since 1992. Initially, she was working on topics related to the history of the Islamic West, tribalism, biographical literature, and onomastics. But more recently, Professor Aguilar is mainly focused on teaching Arabic as a foreign language. She's been directing several projects and research groups. She's developed teaching manuals, especially in relation to Spanish-speaking learners of Arabic. For example, Alatul, Mabruk, Nishan, these are available online. She also coordinates the online Al-Qatra Arabic Dictionary and is the author of more than 50 publications, including monographs, articles, and collected volumes. She's organised herself international conferences, for example, the Arabelle in 2009 and 2012. She's participated in a significant number of national and international conferences, congresses, and seminars, and undertaken several surveys on the teaching of Arabic in Spain. So Professor Aguilar's talk to us today is going to be entitled Sounds and Shapes, Teaching the Arabic Code Phonetically and Graphically. And I welcome Professor Victoria Aguilar to present to us at our conference today. Thank you very much. And I invite you, Professor Aguilar, to take over.
We can't hear you, Victoria.
Now you can hear me now?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Technologies. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor too, and I'm so glad. And it's a little bit strange to communicate through screens, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to be together and from all around the world and to learn from each other. I want to thank the organizers of this Congress for inviting me and for organizing all of this. So I want to share with you this one. This is the topic for today. And I need to change view. Okay, we're ready. So we are talking about sounds and shapes, teaching Arabic code phonetically and graphically. And this is what I'm talking about. First, I would like to present myself, my personal background and my contributions to this field. Second, several neuroscientific bases for learning. and how the good beginning is the best. And about teaching Arabic, you need to choose tradition or truth. The third would be the Arabic sounds with a contrasting between Arabic and English consonant inventories, and some phonetic exercise to acquire Arabic pronunciation. And finally, the Arabic alphabet. So I'm not from an Arab background, which makes me a foreigner. And thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being here as a foreigner in the field of teaching Arabic as a foreign language. I love Arabic, and I started to study it in 1981 in Madrid. After 5 years, I got my degree, and as they Mark told, in 1982, I became a teacher at the University of Murcia. I did my doctorate about Arab tribes in North Africa in Almohad periods, and I studied some historical stuff. So my first year teaching were difficult because I taught what I was taught. I taught grammar, and of course in Spanish. In Spain, we do that way sometimes. But in 1995, I got involved with my colleague Pilar Candela, and Laila Familiar knows her too, in a project to teach Spanish in Sahrawi refugee camps in Tindouf, Algeria. I started then to read about teaching a second language, new researchers, to know about the common European framework of reference, and all of these made a revolution in my mind. I've got about this topic 5 books, 4 of them with 2 colleagues, from Miguel Ángel Manzano from the University of Salamanca and Jesús Zanon, University of Alicante. We started with almost a daftar, هيا نتكلم العربية, to help our students to read and write better. And then we continue with خطوة خطوة, also with my colleagues and Antonio Jimenez, which had more exercises, but still focused on in lines and shapes, and now is downloadable at the University of Alicante. And finally, we did Alatul. Alatul is a material published in a very prestigious publisher in Spain 10 years ago, and it still sells about 1,000 copies a year. So it's not a, it's good, because I think it's very, very useful. Because of the good results of this material, Alatul, in a Spanish context, and it's been used in Spanish universities and other schools, we thought about creating almost the same material in English, and we produced letters and meanings, gateway to Arabic, for an English-speaking context. After contacting several publishers, we decided to put out in open access. So in case you're interested in it, you can download it by free. By the way, there is a Alatul teacher book, and also downloadable in open access, the publisher web. So you can use it for Alatul or letters and meanings. And finally, I did Nishan, an introduction to Moroccan Arabic. I took advantage of the knowledge of the previous publication to produce this book, because this is what I really believe now. And in this occasion, I did it alone, and is to learn Arabic according to an integrated approach. I've been using it for in between 7 or 8 years. I'm happy with the results. I want to talk a little bit about neuroscience. Obviously, I'm not an expert, But I think it's fascinating to know this new discipline because it's advantageous for all branches of knowledge, teaching Arabic included. I'm keen on neuroscientific research in educational fields. At the beginning, when I tried to teach Arabic, talking in Arabic and not in Spanish, I did it in Fusha. I thought it was the best for students. I tried to learn more and more Fusha. I tried to communicate with all Arab people I knew in modern standard Arabic. However, as you know, it is almost impossible to relate in modern standard Arabic. Personal relationships happen in any dialect or French or English even, not in standard Arabic. It took me years to realize that it didn't work that way. But changing our mind is not easy. It is fascinating to learn how our brain works and learns. As you know, our brain changes every day with every single new learning. Our brain is not as a book with pages or as pages in internet, and we can get some information searching for a specific page or item, and we reproduce it as it's written. Not at all. It is more about neurological connections which activate themselves. When we learn something, a new neural connection is done. Our brain creates a pattern and can be reactivated every time we pass by. That means that it is really easy to learn. We were designed to learn. Our brain was designed to do it. But it is very, very, very difficult to erase what we have learned once. When we learn something completely new, we create a new pattern. But when we learn something new about someone we already knew, we use the old pattern. We redefine, outline, tune the pattern, improve it, but we use the old one. What does it mean for the brain learning a language? Learning a language is not just memorizing a list of words and tables of grammar. We need the sound of this language, the phonology, the suitable expression for every circumstance, pragmatics. It's easy to make mistakes. You can notice it when I am talking in English, in syntactic structures, using wrong words or changing meanings or whatever. It's very easy to get wrong. Do you know that a 2-day-old child is able to distinguish if they are telling him a real story or if they are putting words together without meaning? I mean, he knows if there is sense or not in what he's hearing. 2-day-old baby, incredible. That's impressive, our brain ability. And there are some people thinking that if about is or not is difficult. This is not a question. It's not a matter. The matter is that pupils are incredibly intelligent. They can manage with it. A student can manage with difficulties of the Arabic language, whatever they are. But if we believe they don't, we will try to accommodate the language to their small brains. But actually, they are not just small. Humans were equipped with a special kit to relate in talking. And there is a special part in our brain prepared to dialogue. Is not this amazing? As we have hands to touch and handle, in our left hemisphere, there is a section designed to communicate. So that a baby, hours after birth, knows if they are talking to him in different languages. With 6 months, they can recognize different sounds of the languages they are used to and not used to. They can notice if he's hearing his own language or some others. If they are exposed into English, they will also notice the difference in between Spanish and an English 6-year-old child can notice the difference in between Spanish, French, or Italian. Incredible. We need to consider here Antonio Damasio assessment, looking for Spinoza. Traditionally, there is a difference between rational thinking and emotion. Physically, there is a difference. We can locate rational thinking in left hemisphere and feeling in right. But as Damasio argues, human being needs both at the same time, and there are connections in between them. The best connection between reason and emotion, the cleverer we are. That means that to think, to learn properly, we need both parts. We perceive with emotion and with our reason too. So the way we learn is similar to the way we relate. Because of that, I want to talk about Bowlby and his attachment theory. Bowlby. He was an English psychologist focused in the influence of attachment in the first years of life. His theory affirms that the consequences of fair relationships extend throughout life, and confidence in attachment figures is the basis for developing a stable and secure personality. Maybe you consider that there is no connection with all of this information and teaching Arabic. On the contrary, the way we relate with Arabic, when we begin to learn it, the way will follow us through life. It's a big responsibility for us teachers. And as a foreigner, I know what I'm talking about. This is the reason why I focused an important part of my career in the very beginning of the learning, the first year or semester, to learn the Arab language. But how should we teach Arabic? What kind of Arabic? Why? There is a traditional way of teaching, as we were taught, just the standard Arabic, trusting that regional varieties are easy enough to foreign people that they, by themselves, can manage through it. It is a good point to say that classical Arabic is the official language for all Arabic countries. It is a good point to say that it's more profitable, but it is a mistake. And I hope this illustration helps you, all of you, to understand that. I know it very well. I think it's brilliant. This illustration is brilliant. Because as you can see, there are 3 people, 2 Arab people, a woman and a man, and the woman in the middle is doing the presentation. So Jack, Zoji, my husband Jack, and the Arab man is answering in Arabic. Is written, as you can see, 2 Arab talking in Arabic, and the writing is written in Arabic. So the man says, enchanté. It's a French word, but it's written in Arabic letters. And the man, the husband, is supposed to talk in Arabic with an expression, إنني متشرف, but it's written in Latin letters. Why? Because it's classical Arabic. It's not, this expression doesn't fit with the situation. So it's written in Latin. It's Latin, it's not Arabic. Enchanté is Arabic, but إنني متشرف, and when I read it, I try to say mutasharrifun, not mutasharrifun. By the way, I think this illustrates what I want to mean. I studied dissociated Arabic, and it was inadequate to relate with Arabs. But I didn't notice it, because I was told that modern style Fusha was sublime, and even Arab people told me that my language was so good. I believed this statement. I believed them, but they were wrong, so I was. And this is the first point I'd like to mention. According to neuroscientific achievement, in order to teach Arabic, we really need to teach integrated Arabic. Otherwise, we cheat our students. We harm them. Trying to make it easier, we make it more difficult for acquiring the Arabic language in the future. If we use Fusha in contexts where native never use it, we promote dissociate attitudes toward the language. We prevent creating the real nature of the language in the minds of our students. I grant you, it's a damage for life. So I know there are several presentations about this topic in this Congress. And let's begin the sounds of the Arabic language. When we start learning Arabic, there are two big challenges, the new alphabet and the new phonetic code with several different consonants. Let's do it in order. Firstly, sound, secondly, letters. Let's consider Arabic sounds. And there are 28 Arabic consonants on standard Arabic. We know that. Of course, in case we use integrated Arabic, some of them wouldn't be included and some other would appear. But I use integrated Arabic and I use all the Arabic letters because it's integrated with Fusha inside, always. I used here the Arabic letters because they are equivalent to specific sound. So if we consider Ba is a bilabial, is the point of articulation, is plosive articulation mode, and is voiced. So all the consonants placed on the right side, according to the point of articulation, are voiced, and on the left, non-voiced. I hope you can is very comprehensible. But Arabic inventory doesn't mean much if we don't compare it with the mother tongue of our students. So let's compare Arabic and English phonetical inventories. So that's much clearer. And we appreciate the contrast in between both languages. I think it's much more interesting. It's the same framework, everything is the same, but we can see I maintain the Arabic letter for Arabic, and I use the International Phonetic Alphabet for English, because as you know better than me, in English there are sounds with different shapes or letters and letters with different sounds. So I think you know all the letters. We can see here in black letters that are common to both languages exist. Is the tha, the. Or we can see sin, s. And in red, we consider here letters existing in English and not in Arabic. But this is another thing. This is for Arab people learning English. And we need to focus on green ones. They are consonants that don't exist in English. So we need to follow to the next slide, if you don't mind, to see that. So we have identical sounds, 13, not too bad. It's more than a third, not too bad. It's worse in Spanish. Some sounds, they are not identical because they change according to the place where they are located, but they are not a big deal. We are not interested in that, not included in Arabic, but yes, in this 11. we have 11 Arabic sounds not included in English. So, what does it mean? Maybe 11 is not a big number if we don't consider the proportion of the letters in the discourse, in a text, when we are hearing the language. So let's see this slide, and excuse me because of the comma, because I did it in Spanish, and in Spanish we put comma, and then I tried to change it to point, and I couldn't. Oh, excuse me, this is is difficult sometimes. So here we can observe Arabic sounds in context. It's not the same, the lam, which we pronounce when we are talking in Arabic more than 12% than ghain, less than 0.5%. It's not the same. So imagine for a Chinese, you need, for a Chinese people, they need to distinguish in between lam and ra. If not, it's a mess. Their language is a mess. But for English people, we have this colored in yellow. The green one, we have it. Not bad. So about these percentages, I've made several. There are another percentages. There are one existing in internet, but it is with words, single words from a dictionary. So I think it's not useful. I did several with some texts and with some speeches, some programs in Al Jazeera who are translated into letters. So I think it's more real, and most of them are similar. You can find differences in between mim. Maybe mim is a bigger percentage than nun, but it's a small changes from this. So the important thing is we have 11 sounds in Arabic not included in English. If you want, we can ignore some of them because we use them so few, but not all. It's urgent to teach them to recognize and produce these sounds. If not, it's difficult to make them understandable. So these are the sounds. We have the Hamza, and Hamza, you know, we can put it out, but we have Ra, Ain, Kaf, Ha, Sa, Kha, Ta, Da, Ghain, Uda. That's mean 21% of sounds. And some people think, I've heard that several times, that it's easier for a Spaniard to learn Arabic because we have Ha and we have Ra. What do you think? Is it true? Do you want to check it? Okay. So we've seen this in English, 13, maybe 16, with 11 non-existent in English. But in Spanish, ooh, look at this, 15. So it's not more easier for a Spaniard to learn Arabic at all. Of course, we have Ra, where are you? But it's not the same because it's not completely the same. There is a difference. Oof. We can see it in another slide, maybe better. And here we can notice with percentages, because here is clearer. So what do you think? 21% in English, consonants non-existent in Arabic, consonant non-existent in English, but 36 in Spanish. Ooh, 36. Why? Because we don't have ya, we don't have wow, we don't have ha, and you have it in English. And this is the reason why when Spaniards talk in Arabic, we have this disgusting accent. Sometimes Spanish people say Arabilla, Misrilla, Maghribilla, and it's very disgusting that. And you don't have that problem in English. So I think I don't need to say anything with this image in front of you. The important thing to consider here and about phonetics is that we need to take care about them. Sometimes teachers do not realize that the beginning of learning is crucial for students, similarly to children's attachment. Their first months are the most important one for the rest of their lives, even if they cannot remember anything about them. I think it's better like that. We can help our students to relate with Arabic through new sounds and shapes and meet the challenge or fail in it. When we don't take care about Arabic pronunciation and ignore phonological errors, they become fossilized very easily, impeding the students from being understood. Is it possible to do anything about it? Or a non-Arabic speaker will always make phonetic mistakes? Is a foreigner unable to pronounce the emphatics? Can there be 3 key sounds, ein, hau, kaf, which prove if one is a native speaker or not as a shibboleth? We have learned that babies have a special key to perceive sounds. It's fascinating. Researchers have proved that babies several hours after their birth can know if they are hearing different languages, although they cannot understand them, of course. They perceive that different languages are different. When babies 6 months old, they identify sounds, different sounds and phonemes of the languages they have been exposed to and not been exposed to. But they cannot perceive different sounds after 1 year. Why? That is, their brain focus on their own language, specialize in the sounds that linger around and lose others. It's a perceptual narrowing, an adjustment to pay attention to relevant information. Doubtless, phonic competence is crucial to communicate. It is essential to develop the pronunciation in our students. And I prefer to talk about pronunciation than phonetics. As teachers of second language, we don't need to describe phonemes and give a theoretical information about them, but we need to help pupils to recognize and produce all sounds in the target language. Children don't need to be taught about pronunciation. They acquire it without noticing it. By the way, babies perceive first rhythmic and intonative units, and adults have difficulties about that to suprasegmental elements in pronunciation. Knowing the Arabic pronunciation is basic to speak in Arabic and to understand native speakers. If pronunciation is not fitting, communication won't success and come on fluently. A good pronunciation means a better acceptance by natives, because they don't need to pay excessive attention to understand or asking for repeating or explaining the message. On the contrary, if pronunciation is not accurate, it demands a permanent attention of the listener and the possibility of getting tired of listening, lose patience or mocking the speaker. Besides, a good pronunciation reinforces the student's security. Sadly, we don't use a lot of tasks with pronunciation as a target. How do we get a good pronunciation in our students? Of course, there are researchers about how age is so important to learn pronunciation, and the acoustic ability is a gift you have or you don't. In Spanish, we say to have an ear in front of the other. That means not being very good in discriminating sounds. We've heard about the phonic sieve by Trubetskoy, this narrowing with different sounds not included in our mother tongue. There is an influence, of course, of our own mother tongue in successive second languages learning. We are deaf to sound not included in our languages, apart from we know. But the good news is we haven't been deaf to all of these sounds. We were a baby, all of we, and we had the ability of recognize Arabic sounds in and every language sounds. But we specialized to the sound and made meaning to us. No matter it's more or less difficult, we need to teach Arabic pronunciation. There are hundreds of books and exercises for teaching English pronunciation, but few to teach Arabic pronunciation. And we need to pay attention on it. In Spanish, imagine 15 different sounds, more than a half of the repertory. Very difficult, very much information to pay attention. So I started to do an exercise with my students after reading Damasio's books and after a workshop about voice. I thought, if we had the ability to recognize when we were babies, our physical ability is out of question. Damasio says, all we need is enough mental images, audio file, connecting to our neural system. So I designed this exercise. I asked my students to close their eyes so they are not distracted. I use this exercise with these 15 sounds according to the relevance. So the first one is the Ein because it's the more profitable. And I use the Ein the first day of the teaching. The first day we do this exercise. So when they close their eyes, they are not distracted. And at the same time, they could focus on what they are hearing. They should trust in me, of course, because they pronounce words that they don't know it. They don't understand them. But they open the ears. Of course, the first day they laugh at all. But after the second day, they don't laugh. They just listen and pay attention and they repeat them. They open the ears, they tune them, and they have success. We consider one new sound every time. I arrange, as you can see, very easy common words. This is made for Darija, for Moroccan. 25 of them in 5 categories. Proper names, first one. Place names, international, if there are, with Ein, there is not. Frequent words and idioms or small structures, longer. I say every word several times and students say it after me as they hear it. The exercise takes me 5 minutes and they repeat in between 120 to 150 Arabic words, all at least they can pronounce properly the consonants more relevant of them in terms of percentage, as Ain, Ha, and Kaf. I follow the order of frequency, and we can do it together, or as now with these days, they did it at home. So I send them audio files and they repeat it after me. So this is an exercise from this year on one student. You can hear my voice. I shorted it because 5 minutes is too much. So it's just a little bit, just you to know how the exercise works. We can hear, okay?
Ali, Saeed, Ali, Abdullah, Ali, Ismail, Saida, Sadia, Aziz, Aziza, Saeed, Ali, Abdul Malik, Roman, Saudiya, Saudi, Saudiya, Al-Iraq, Iraqi, Iraqiyya, Saudiya, Ali, Aziza, Roman, Al-Iraq, Roman, Amman, أربعة 14 سعود 19 7
So this is a small part of it. What's the result? The result is a big amount of new connections, but just focusing on these new connections. So they get a new sound and they know they can produce it, closing their eyes. This is very important. Of course, not always will pronounce it perfectly from this moment on, but the thing is, they know it, they recognize it, and they can copy it. As Damasio says, every knowledge in our brain talk about neural connection. The connection is made, and as the teacher talks and the teacher pronounces all the time this consonant, the connection will be reactivated when they hear the sounds once and again and again and again. I've prepared an exercise with the Spanish consonant, la L. Just in case we have time, we can do it so you can feel as it works and you understand better the mechanics, because you can do it in your classes. Of course, I know a good pronunciation is a question of hearing, motivation, age of a student, input number of students in the classroom. But no matter of all of these parts, it's compulsory to teach Arabic pronunciation. And let me show you some of the results. When I taught Fusha, I don't know if the audio is very good, but after 60 hours of class, they have to do a presentation and to present themselves to say all the things we've learned during these first 60 hours. So let's hear a little bit.
السلام عليكم. اسمي يعقوب. اسمي الكامل يعقوب لطفي. عمري 20 سنة وأنا من إسبانيا، حيث أدرس الفيلولوجيا الإنجليزية. أتكلم الإنجليزية والإسبانية جيد وقليلا من العربي. والدي اسمه رافائيل، هو يعمل مهندس طرقات، ووالدتي اسمها إليزا، يعمل أمينة من محكمة مدينة.
We can listen to another one in last January, now with Derija, with Moroccan Arabic. So
سلام، أنا اسميتي مارتا وكنيتي إرنانديز. أنا اسميتي العربية مينا. أنا عندي 18 سنة. أنا استديت في نهار شهر 5 سنة 2006. أنا من إسبانيا، من مورسيا. أنا كنسكن في ألماري مورسيا، شارع إسلا مندورو، النمرة 48. أنا كنقرا الترجمة في الجامعة والموسيقى. أنا كنحضر الإسبانية، الإنجليزية، الكورية شوية والعربية شوية. التليفون ديالي 28 87 01 23. أنا كيعجبني الموسيقى، الأدب والصفة. أنا ما كيعجبني الكرة والرسم. مغني مفضل ديالي BTS وكيتونادا. ماما اسميتها روسا وعندها 45 سنة. هي خدامة في البوثو. بابا اسميتو خوسي وهو عنده 48 سنة وهو خدام بحال ماما. أختي اسميتها كلاوديا. هي عندها 11 سنة وهي كتقرا في المدرسة. سلامة.
So we will go on with the Arabic alphabet. And our innate human tendency is to communicate orally, not to write. But it's so cool to learn Arabic writing. So dealing with the Arabic alphabet, I will use these material letters and meanings in order to you understand. It's a material to 45 up to 60 teaching hours. And the system employed here is to present the letters is a little bit different from the traditional alphabet sequence in order to profit pedagogical criteria, starting with simple letters to more complex one. In the later units, the pharyngeal and the emphatic consonants. So it's the opposite with the acoustic. We introduce easily recognized words to facilitate reading strategies, which make up more than 50% of the word. You can see it here. So Danube, Al-Amazon, and Nil, Al-Urdun. So it's like playing with new consonants. Okay. So I think I'm done with 5 minutes. Extra, express, Asia, Swisra. So international words and a lot of place names and simple names. We limit the use of auxiliary signs and vowels, because it's the way they will find Arabic in the future. And in every unit there is the normal thing: content, goals, letters and written things, instruction, auxiliary signs, grammatical, orthographical and phonetic question, general vocabulary, proper nouns, a specific lexicon, reading exercise, and this is very important: mechanical, reading mechanical and comprehensible. So what's the right sentence, for example? And writing exercise with 2 types of writing, naskh and ruqa, in this material with modern standard Arabic. The idea is that sound and shape should come together in the same working space. And of course, we have more than 80 audio files for this material. Dealing with the skills of reading and writing is almost the same process. We will see how can we manage to teach shapes in order to increase the students' confidence in the new graphic code. It's forbidden to write a Latin letter or to a transcription, for example. So after these 60 hours, we can find this kind of text with our students. This is 2 years ago. السلام عليكم، أنا سميتي إيفا بالدرجة بالإسبانية وبالعربية سميتي عبير. أنا كنيتي لوبيث خيمينيز، عندي 18 سنة، أنا من إسبانيا وكنهدر it's difficult to talk in English when Arabic is there are a lot of mistakes, of course, is their text. And in this year, I found this one. I think the letter is so precious. It's incredible. Salam, أنا سميتي إينيس وكنيتي سميتي. أنا عندي 18 سنة، زادت نهار 29 شهر 1 سنة 2002. أنا من إسبانيا، كنسكن في سيزا ثيثا شارع لابا رقم 7 طبقة 4. رقم التليفون عندي بابا سميته سلفادور وماما سميتها كارمين. بابا عنده 52 سنة وماما عندنا تتتا. So I think they can, if we believe, and they can do it. And for preparing this talk, I was watching videos since 15 years ago. And I realized that I've learned to teach better, and that the students learn better too. So as I learn, they learn, and they can do it better presentation, better writing, better everything, because I trust in them. So this presentation arrived to its end. Thank you for your patience and your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Aguilar. That was really interesting. And as a beginner learner of Arabic myself, I can relate a lot to many of the points raised. And thank you for joining us this morning from, I presume, from Murcia. Okay. I've seen a couple of messages coming through in the chat, and I'll maybe start off with one, and then our colleague Noor is going to pass over some further questions to me. The first question from Farnaz Peri. You mentioned the Ain exercise. Do you think the sounds placement in relation to other sounds, for example, in relation to noon or meme in the word, do you consider this to be important, or is it to an extent somewhat irrelevant in the context you've been using it?
I'm not sure I understood the question. The meme and noon?
Well, the sounds placement that you're teaching the students, do you think its position in relation to other sounds affects the way students learn it, or do you think the position of the sound that you're teaching in relation to other sounds is less relevant?
Yeah, because of that, I think we need to isolate the new sounds, and because of that, we don't need to teach vowels in Arabic, because Arabic vowels don't care at all, because it's so difficult to understand when we use this and this. It's better to use our ear to know. I mean, the theoretical background is so difficult. It's better to listen. But with consonants it's different, because ha is ha, and it can change a little bit, but just a little bit. Ha is ha. I don't know if you paid attention to the students following after me. So she could repeat Ain very well when was with Fatha, but not with Kasra. With Kasra, she did a different sound. So they are learning, and the sounds are very different according to the place. As Damasio says, we don't have audio files in our mind, and when we pronounce a word, a new word, tariqa, we say it always the same way, because we don't have audio files in our mind. It's a kind of connection, neural connection. Because of that, when a consonant is near an emphatic, that place affect to the consonant. And especially in Moroccan, it's obvious that there are more emphatics than in classical Arabic. And but we need to teach some of the things and not all, because there is a say: if we don't make it clear, we make it darker. So we need to make it clear, just enough. And what I mean, we need to teach these sounds from the very beginning, not to tell everything about Arabic sounds and Arabic phonetics, of course, but just to teach this from the very beginning, just to manage a student to pronounce and feel insecure of themselves when they say, why not? Oh, why not?
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions from a colleague, which I'm going to come on to in a minute, but just this might be an interesting one to then move on. A question from Marwa: what's the corpus you've used to get the frequency of use of Arabic letters?
The purpose?
The corpus.
Sorry?
What's your source for obtaining the frequency of the Arabic letters that you presented in your graphs?
Oh, if you want, I can send something. I can send because I've made several frequency lists, but I use one, so I can send it.
Okay, thank you.
In 5 minutes, I send it to you.
Okay. A question from Noah Yakubi: from your experience teaching Darija and MSA, which letters or sounds do you find students usually find more difficult in terms of pronunciation?
None.
None, okay. And a follow-on question is, when you're teaching Darija pronunciation, do you find it easier for the students, I guess, to teach using Arabic script or Latin script, because there's some experience expressed in the question?
Never Latin. Forbidden. Never Latin. Why? They are clever. Never Latin. Why? Yeah, our students need to be. They are adults, and if we teach Arabic in Latin letters, we make analphabets. They need to cope with Arab letters and with Arab writing, and writing most of them are in Fusha. So this is the reason why I teach Moroccan, but with Arabic, with Dal, with the, with all the letters non-existent in the dialect, but that they exist in Fusha. And I prefer to write nta with alif hamza nun ta than just nun ta. Why? Because in the future, Arab writing is written like that. It's very easy to accommodate themselves, and they do it. They do it without any problem, or without problem first, second, third time, and then they can do it. I think it's the best thing. Or even it's not the normal way the Rija writes is written. I mean, I don't use the wow, the yellow. Normally in the Rija we use Binto written with wow at the end, and I use the ha. Why? Because when I explain to them, I use that. It's like preparing them for Fusha, because we are talking about who I am, who is my family, and we need to talk about that in Fusha. But the future is reading and writing is the Rija, sorry, but the future is Fusha. So the writing is in Fusha.
And a related question, and apologies, I may have missed this at the start of your last answer, but what's the reason that you're emphasizing the use of the Moroccan dialect? Is it related to the proximity of Morocco and Spain?
Yeah, and we have in Spain, we have almost 1 million of Moroccan people. So it's the biggest community. So everyone has a neighbor, a Moroccan neighbor. We hear 200% of the Spanish population speaks Moroccan, not Egyptian. So Moroccan in England is not, is weird, and but in Spain we need to teach Moroccan.
Sure. Time for a couple more questions. There are two related questions, both related to, I guess, listening materials. So there was a question about, do you use any, you haven't mentioned particularly very much on listening exercises as such, but there's also a question about whether you use your own recordings or whether you also combine those with authentic materials. Do you want to maybe just give a comment on that?
I use recording materials. For the first year, for this first semester, I use that materials with Nishan, now in Moroccan, and afterwards, of course, real materials.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just flicking through the last questions.
And by the way, in our classroom, there are some Arab people, Moroccan people. So some of them, they start of learning writing and reading with us. So it's very interesting because they know Moroccan, and but some of them never wrote a word in Arabic.
Okay. Hannah, is it possible for one of the audience to ask a question directly?
They don't have access to the microphone. I'm
no, that's okay.
Sorry.
Mohammed, I'm apologizing that you won't be able to ask. Okay, there are a number of other questions, Victoria, too many now to ask. Can I maybe ask if we were able to just send a small digest of the questions to you afterwards? Would you be able to maybe respond to a few of them in writing?
I try.
But otherwise, we're at the end of the time allowed for the first session, and there are too many interesting questions to ask to choose which one is the right one for the last one. So maybe if I draw things to a close here, we'll take note of the other questions that have been asked and send those over to you, Victoria, and see if we can move things forward. But otherwise, just to say thank you very much. It was a really interesting opening address and sets us well on course for a really interesting conference. So thank you, Professor Aguilar.
Thank you.
Okay.